What kept me breathing through all of it? If I'm being honest, it was a mix of pure determination and deep hatred. By the summer of 1941, the world was already on fire. Fighting had spread across Europe and Southeast Asia, but the United States still wasn't officially involved. To me, though, the army wasn't about the war. I was just a restless 16-year-old kid looking for a way out. I'd grown up on a farm, and I was tired of the same dirt roads and same routines. I wanted something different. I wanted a fresh start. So one day I hopped on my motorcycle, took off down the road, and thought to myself, "Army, here I come." I pulled up to the recruiting office, and a sergeant stood in the doorway watching me. He asked if I needed something. I told him straight out, I wanted to join the army. He looked me over and asked how old I was. I said, 21. That was my first big lie. And it was a whopper. About an hour and a half later, I was sworn in. Just like that. They handed me 3 pairs of trousers labeled for Panama, Alaska, and the Philippine Islands. The recruiter talked up the Philippines like it was heaven on earth. He painted it as a tropical paradise, and I bought every word of it. I volunteered without thinking twice. What I didn't know was how fast that so-called paradise would turn into hell. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched massive attacks all across the Pacific, starting with Pearl Harbor. Just 10 hours later, they invaded the Philippines. Even though American and Filipino forces outnumbered them, most of us were poorly trained and unprepared. The Japanese just kept coming, wave after wave. All we could do was fight and pray help would arrive. For 4 long months, we battled them. Every single day we heard the same thing, that supplies and reinforcements were on the way. We listened. We waited. And they never showed up. Eventually, the Philippines fell. Around 100,000 American and Filipino soldiers became prisoners of the Japanese Empire. For us, it felt like the end of the world. We never believed it would come to that. When it finally did, it crushed us. We were worn out, beaten down, and empty inside. They gathered us at Marivilles, at the southern tip of Bataan. None of us had any idea what was about to happen next. When we first arrived, we heard gunshots non-stop. They were executing people behind us, one after another. Then they lined us up and forced us to strip of everything, every possession we had except our boxer shorts. They dumped our belongings on the ground, took our canteens, and poured the water out right in front of us. After that, they ordered us to grab what was left and start walking. 70,000 of us were marched more than 60 miles toward a prison camp. Along the way, the cruelty was constant and merciless. Thousands never made it. We didn't hear about the Death March later, we watched it happen with our own eyes. I saw a man beheaded in a single swing of a saber. No hesitation. No warning. Just gone. There was a massive bomb crater filled with water, and they forced American soldiers to shovel rocks into it. When the men collapsed from exhaustion and couldn't move anymore, the guards kicked them into the water below. That was the march. And that was only the beginning. They had 4 Japanese guards standing there, each holding a sharpened bamboo pole. They forced those poles down into the wet slush and water, then buried the men alive right in front of us. By the time it was over, we had gone 6 days and 7 nights without sleep, without food, without water, without anything at all. When I finally reached the end, my legs wouldn't lift anymore. I literally couldn't make my feet move. My tongue had swollen so badly it filled my mouth. That's how far gone I was. Completely starved, beaten down, and worn to nothing, we eventually staggered into Camp O'Donnell. But that march wasn't the end. It was just the doorway to what I still call hell on earth. In October of 1942, I was loaded onto a ship with hundreds of other American prisoners and sent to a slave labor camp in Osaka, Japan. Every day I worked in a lumber yard from morning to night, freezing the whole time. One day it was 8 degrees outside. I was walking through the streets of Osaka with my hands tucked into my pockets, just trying to keep what little warmth I had. A guard barked at me to take my hands out. I did exactly what he said. But when we reached the camp, that same guard went straight to the gate and pointed me out like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. They dragged me to the guard house, where an interpreter and an enraged Japanese major were waiting. The major sat behind a desk while the interpreter yelled at me, saying I had disobeyed orders. He said soldiers don't walk the streets of Osaka, or anywhere, with their hands in their pockets. He reminded me I was a soldier. I told him the truth. I said, "No, I'm not a soldier. I'm a prisoner of war in Japan." That's when the major exploded. He slammed his fist on the desk and shouted for them to take me outside. He said he was going to make an example of me. They gathered every POW in the camp and forced them to stand there and watch. The major stepped up, pressed his saber against my neck, and asked if I had any last words. I said I did. I looked him straight in the eyes and opened my mouth, not even realizing what was coming out. I told him he could kill me, but he would never kill my spirit, and that my spirit would follow him for the rest of his life. That scared him. He was superstitious. Instead of killing me, he ordered me thrown into solitary confinement. They dropped me into a hole in the ground, about 5 feet by 5 feet by 5 feet. I stayed there for 7 days and 7 nights. Somewhere along the way, my mind completely broke. I didn't know where I was anymore. I'd drift in and out, asking myself basic things: what's my name? Do I have a family? How did I get here? When they finally opened the hole, I couldn't stand. I tried pulling myself up, but the guard stomped on my hands, smashed me in the back of the head with his rifle butt, and knocked me out cold. I don't know how many times he kicked me while I was down, but I do know he broke 3 ribs on my right side and 2 on my left. I was beaten so badly I was barely alive. And even then, I knew the only reason I was still breathing was the fire burning inside me. My hatred had grown so strong that I refused to die before I had the chance to get revenge. I had to live. I needed revenge. And that hatred only kept growing. One day, as another prisoner and I were walking toward the camp hospital, we heard engines overhead. 2 Japanese Zero fighter planes came screaming toward us. They bombed the hospital directly. No mistake, no accident. When the planes pulled up from the attack, they came back low, right over the road where we were walking. I dove into a ditch on the right side. My buddy jumped into the ditch on the left. Then they dropped a small bomb. I stood up and started looking for him. I didn't see anything at first. Then I looked toward the other ditch. I walked over and searched through the dirt and debris. The first thing I found was his left foot, still inside his shoe. He was gone. There was nothing left of him. They had deliberately targeted the hospital. About 115 of our men were killed right there in their beds, along with a couple of nurses and others who never stood a chance. That moment lit something inside me. A hatred so strong it felt like fire. And from that day on, it only grew. Every single day brought something new to feed it. I remained a prisoner of war in Japan until August of 1945. When the second atomic bomb hit Nagasaki, Japan finally surrendered, and the war came to an end. After nearly 4 years in captivity, there were no guards left. No orders. No chains. We simply walked out of the camp and boarded a train toward freedom. But for me, the war didn't stop there. It followed me home. What I had seen and lived through planted a hatred so deep inside me that no peace treaty on earth could touch it. It took first place in my life. I couldn't let it go. I didn't want to let it go. I carried it with pride. I told myself over and over, I'll kill them. I'll kill them. Before I die, I'll get the chance to kill at least one of them. Then the nightmares started. I dreamed that I wasn't safe at home, that I was right back there. The beatings felt just as real. The fear was just as real. One night I woke up on my knees on the floor, crying like a child. That's when something broke inside me. I kept saying, I can't do this. I can't live this way. And then I said the words that changed everything, I have to get rid of it. That was my turning point. I made up my mind to pray, again and again, and try to release the hatred before it destroyed me completely. I started looking at the Japanese people differently. I forced myself to ask why. Why did they do these things? I realized they had lived for years under absolute control. The emperor wasn't just a leader, he was treated like a god. They were taught from childhood to show no mercy to the enemy. And the truth I finally accepted was this: the Japanese people themselves weren't monsters. They were people. Many of them were good people, just like us, shaped by what they were taught. When I finally let go of that hatred, I found peace for the first time in my life. From then on, I chose to use my experiences not to spread anger, but to talk about forgiveness, and what it can do to a human soul.